Joseph Duggar probably thought his sisters would stay quiet. After all, that is exactly what they were trained to do their entire lives. Bound by the relentless pressure of their upbringing to forgive, forget, and protect the family name at all costs, the Duggar men have always relied on the absolute silence of the women in their lives. But the ultimate irony, the catastrophic self-own in this entire situation, is that the very women Joseph grew up with, the sisters who were once forced to shield this family's darkest secrets, are no longer playing by the old rules. They are using their massive public platforms to publicly label these reports of his actions as outright evil. Instead of reciting the tired, carefully crafted lines written by their father, they are siding with the law. This is the moment the Duggar empire officially fractures beyond repair, and Joseph's expectation of blind loyalty has just become the catalyst for his own undoing. If you are as absolutely shocked as we are by this massive, unprecedented shift in the Duggar family dynamics, hit that like button right now to show your support for the sisters who are finally speaking out. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a single deep dive into this unfolding story. To really understand the magnitude of what is happening right now, we have to look back at the golden era of the Duggar family, the era of the false image. For years, decades even, the Duggar siblings presented a united front of impenetrable sibling loyalty to the world. They were the picture-perfect, deeply religious family where a harsh word was never spoken and sibling conflict was seemingly non-existent. Jim, Bob, and Michelle built a multi-million-dollar reality television empire on the premise that their strict, isolated way of life produced perfect, obedient children. The core tenet of their world, deeply rooted in the teachings of the Institute in Basic Life Principles, or the IBLP, was the umbrella of authority. The patriarch was the ultimate ruler, and the children, especially the daughters, were expected to remain sweetly submissive. They were literally taught to keep sweet, to push down any negative emotions, to mask their pain with a smile, and to never, ever bring shame to the family name. We saw the true, chilling power of this conditioning during the initial Josh Duggar scandals of 2015. When the world found out what the oldest Duggar son had done to his own sisters, the family PR machine went into overdrive. Jim Bob did not protect his daughters. Instead, he weaponized their obedience. The sisters, who were the actual victims, were paraded on national television in a highly orchestrated Fox News interview with Megyn Kelly. They were placed in front of millions of viewers to defend the family, to downplay the severity of the abuse they suffered, and to essentially take the heat off their brother and their parents. It was a masterclass in manipulation. The world watched as these young women, clearly traumatized and deeply brainwashed, recited the narrative that Josh had repented, that it was a mistake of his youth, and that the family had moved on. At that time, the wall of Duggar loyalty seemed absolutely unbreakable. The men in the family learned a very clear, very dangerous lesson that year. No matter what you do, no matter how egregious your actions, the family will close ranks and the women will be forced to cover for you. But you can only suppress the truth for so long before the pressure becomes too much to contain. Over the last few years, the carefully constructed facade began to crumble, revealing the first real cracks in the Duggar foundation. These were the ignored warnings that Jim Bob chose to overlook in his arrogance. The most significant blow came from Jill. For years, she had been the golden child, the obedient daughter who did everything right. But as she stepped away from the family compound and began to experience the real world alongside her husband, Dillard, the blinders came off. Jill went through an intense, painful period of deconstruction. She started therapy. She began to recognize the toxic, controlling nature of her upbringing. And then she dropped a bombshell. Jill wrote a massive tell-all book, Counting the Cost, which completely dismantled the wholesome image her parents had sold to the public. She exposed Jim Bob's deep financial manipulation, revealing how he kept the millions of dollars the children earned from the show, tricking them into signing contracts on the eve of their weddings. But more importantly, she exposed the deep emotional and spiritual abuse that was rampant behind the closed doors of the big house. Jill publicly stated that she was done keeping her father's secrets, and she wasn't the only one quietly unbrainwashing herself. Joy-Anna, who had always been known as a tomboy and a fiercely loyal follower of her father's rules, also began to step back. After getting married and having children of her own, Joy-Anna's perspective shifted. While she was less vocal than Jill initially, insider reports indicated that Joy-Anna was quietly distancing herself from the strict, legalistic teachings of the IBLP. She stopped adhering to the strict dress codes, she started sending her kids to experiences outside the cult's approval, and she began to build a life independent of her father's iron grip. The sisters were waking up. They were unlearning decades of conditioning. They were discovering their own voices. But Jim Bob, blinded by his own authority, failed to see that these cracks were actually the start of an earthquake. He still believed he could control them. Then came the catalyst, the action that sparked the total downfall of the family's remaining credibility. According to insider reports and exclusive theories that are currently setting the Duggar community absolutely on fire, explosive news has broken that Joseph Duggar has allegedly been arrested for a 2020 incident involving a 9-year-old girl. Now, we must emphasize that these are exclusive, reports swirling within closed circles, but the mere existence of these allegations has acted like a bomb going off in Tontitown. For the sisters, hearing these insider theories isn't just a news story. It is a horrifying, visceral repeat of the family's darkest trauma. It rips open the very old, very deep wounds that they have spent years in intensive therapy trying to heal. Imagine the psychological toll. You spend your entire childhood being told to forgive your abuser. You spend your early adulthood realizing you were manipulated into defending him on national television. You finally break free. You finally find peace. You finally establish boundaries to protect your own children. And then you get a phone call that it might be happening all over again. Another brother. Another shocking betrayal of trust. Another helpless victim. The parallels to the 2015 nightmare are chilling, but the context is entirely different now. In 2015, they were under Jim Bob's roof and under his control. Today, they are independent women who have sworn to themselves that they will never, ever be complicit in the cover-up of abuse again. The reports surrounding Joseph didn't just shock the sisters. They triggered a fierce, protective rage. The trauma bond that once forced them to smile through their pain had snapped. They were no longer the scared teenagers sitting on a Fox News couch. They were mothers, advocates, and survivors who immediately recognized the exact same patterns of deceit playing out right in front of them. Despite this massive shift in his daughters, Jim Bob Duggar's immediate reaction was a masterclass in hubris. The Duggar patriarch and his shrinking circle of IBLP loyalists went into immediate lockdown, executing the exact same cover-up playbook they have used for decades. Thinking they could still get away with it, they issued no public statements. They circled the wagons. According to exclusive insider theories, Jim Bob expected the adult children to maintain the strict code of silence. He believed that the old tactics of intimidation, the subtle threats of being completely cut off from the family, and the heavy burden of religious guilt would still work. He allegedly began making phone calls, trying to manage the narrative behind the scenes, reminding his children of the importance of family unity and the destructive nature of secular media. In Jim Bob's mind, the hierarchy was still intact. He is the head, and they are the body. He truly believed that even if Jill and Joy-Anna were upset, they would ultimately defer to his crisis management strategy, just as they had always been trained to do. The sheer arrogance required to look at the wreckage of the Josh scandals, to read Jill's scathing book, and to still believe that you hold absolute power over these women is staggering. Jim Bob was operating in a reality that no longer existed. He thought he could bury these reports. He thought he could protect Joseph the same way he protected Josh, by silencing the victims and threatening anyone who dared to speak the truth. He banked everything on the assumption that his daughters were still afraid of him. But he severely underestimated the transformative power of healing, and he completely failed to realize that the silence he was relying on was about to be shattered in the most public, humiliating way possible. The dam finally broke. The silence was shattered, not by the tabloids or anonymous sources, but by the very inner circle Jim Bob thought he had completely locked down. When the insider reports and exclusive theories about a potential court case and horrifying audio recordings started leaking into the public sphere, the sisters did the unthinkable. They spoke out. Jill Dillard, who had already drawn a massive line in the sand with her memoir, did not hesitate for a single second. She released a blistering, unequivocal statement that hit the internet like a tidal wave and sent shockwaves through the fundamentalist community. She didn't use the soft, passive language her mother taught her. She didn't ask for prayers for her brother's heart or frame this as a spiritual attack. She stated loudly and clearly that she was shocked and heartbroken, and most crucially, she explicitly condemned abuse in all its forms. This was not a PR-approved family joint statement coordinated by Jim Bob. This was Jill, standing firmly on her own 2 feet, looking directly at the camera of public opinion, and absolutely refusing to carry water for an alleged predator. And she was not alone. Joy-Anna, who has spent the last few years quietly but firmly dismantling her IBLP programming, followed suit. According to exclusive insider theories, Joy-Anna was an absolute wreck behind the scenes, completely devastated and physically ill over the horrific reports regarding her brother. But she channeled that intense devastation into righteous, protective anger. She joined Jill in breaking the family omerta, making it clear that her loyalty lies with truth and safety, not with keeping Duggar secrets. But the incredible shocks did not stop with the sisters. In a move that left the entire Duggar-watching community completely stunned, their brother Jason took to his Instagram account. Jason, who had always been seen as one of the loyal Duggar boys, a guy who was still somewhat adjacent to the compound and the family construction businesses, did not mince words. He publicly addressed the swirling exclusive theories and called the situation straight-up evil. He did not offer a defense. He did not deflect blame onto the secular world. He used the exact word that strikes absolute fear into the heart of the IBLP establishment: evil. By publicly validating the horror of the situation, Jill, Joy-Anna, and Jason effectively poured gasoline on Jim Bob's desperate attempt at a cover-up and lit the match themselves. They burned the old family playbook to the ground in front of the entire world. The Duggar PR machine, a rusty, outdated relic from their TLC glory days, completely short-circuited in the face of this rebellion. For years, Jim Bob's go-to strategy whenever a scandal broke was to aggressively attack the messenger. He would label any negative press as news, an attack on their Christian faith, or a secular witch hunt designed by the devil to tear down a righteous, God-fearing family. But how do you run a persecution defense when your own flesh and blood are the ones holding the megaphone? You simply can't. The scrambling inside the Duggar camp right now must be absolutely deafening. Jim Bob and his shrinking circle of enablers suddenly found themselves completely paralyzed. They couldn't issue a statement denouncing the media because the media was simply reporting on what Jill, Joy-Anna, and Jason were publicly confirming on their own verified accounts. The old playbook of denial and deflection was entirely useless. They were trapped in a corner of their own making, suffocating under the weight of their own children's honesty. In the past, the family would issue carefully crafted, heavily sanitized statements, asking for prayers for the accused, framing the horrific situation as a spiritual battle or a momentary lapse in judgment that required grace. But the sisters completely flipped the script. They were publicly validating the severe, horrifying nature of these insider reports, and rather than rallying around their brother to protect his image, they were explicitly praying for the victim instead of the accused. You have to understand what a massive, fundamental shift this is in Duggar theology. In the twisted teachings of the IBLP, the focus is almost always heavily placed on the repentance of the abuser, fast-tracking their return to the fold to protect the family's reputation at all costs. The victim is often treated as an afterthought, a stumbling block, or in the most sickening cases, a willing accomplice. By centering the victim, by focusing their public empathy and their platform's power on the innocent party rather than the accused brother, Jill and Joy-Anna didn't just break a public relations rule. They completely shattered a core foundational rule of the dangerous cult they were raised in. This left Jim Bob with zero leverage. He couldn't spin this narrative. He couldn't hide it behind closed doors. His own children were dismantling his defense in real time, leaving the patriarch completely exposed, humiliated, and utterly powerless to control the narrative for the first time in his life. The fallout from these blistering public statements was swift, brutal, and led to a profound isolation that Joseph Duggar has likely never experienced in his entire life. The siblings completely iced him out. In a family that measures love and loyalty by physical proximity, shared identical beliefs, and public endorsements, this sudden, complete excommunication was the ultimate betrayal of the old Duggar way. By publicly supporting the rule of law and fiercely centering the alleged victim, Jill, Joy-Anna, and the brothers who stood with them sent a crystal-clear, terrifying message to the world, to Jim Bob, and directly to Joseph himself. You are entirely on your own. There will be no family slush fund to pay for expensive defense attorneys this time. There will be no coordinated media campaign to rehabilitate your ruined image. There will be no sisters sitting on a couch on national television, choking back tears and begging the public for your forgiveness. The family trauma bond, that invisible, suffocating chain that kept them all tethered to the exact same toxic cycle of abuse and enablement for decades, has finally been permanently broken. For Joseph, the realization that the protective, impenetrable shield of the Duggar name has been completely stripped away must be absolutely terrifying. He grew up watching his older brother Josh commit horrific, unspeakable acts, yet still receive the massive financial backing, the ruthless legal protection, and the unwavering public defense of his parents. Joseph undoubtedly expected that exact same safety net to catch him when these reports surfaced. He expected the family to fall in line. But the safety net has been cut to shreds. The siblings have drawn a hard, impenetrable boundary, and they are standing guard. They are absolutely refusing to let their own lives, their own hard-won reputations, and most importantly, the safety of their own children be tainted by the horrifying exclusive theories surrounding their brother. This is not just a typical sibling squabble. This is a permanent, monumental severance. They have consciously chosen morality over blind, cult-like loyalty. They have chosen the safety and validation of an alleged victim over the comfort and protection of an alleged predator. By doing so, they have left Joseph completely isolated, facing the full, terrifying weight of these exclusive theories and potential legal consequences without the massive, wealthy Duggar machine standing behind him. The walls have closed in, and the very siblings he thought he could control are the ones who locked the door. This brings us to the ultimate irony of this entire devastating saga, a poetic justice so profound that it feels almost scripted, yet it is playing out in real time before our very eyes. The absolute most staggering element of this entire situation is the identity of the people leading the charge against Joseph. The very siblings who were systematically forced, coerced, and emotionally blackmailed into covering up for Josh's horrific crimes a decade ago are now the loudest, most unyielding voices ensuring that Joseph does not receive that exact same sickening protection. Think about the sheer psychological weight of that transformation. 10 years ago, Jim Bob Duggar successfully used his daughters as human shields to protect his eldest son, his television show, and his lucrative media empire. He paraded traumatized young women in front of the world and manipulated them into telling millions of viewers that the system worked, that their abuser was cured, and that the family was completely unified in their forgiveness. They were stripped of their agency and forced to swallow their own trauma for the sake of the Duggar brand. But today, the script has been violently flipped, and the cycle of toxic enablement ends right here, right now, permanently. The sisters have looked at these horrifying insider reports and exclusive theories regarding Joseph, and they have collectively decided that the buck stops with them. They will not sit on another couch. They will not film another Force special. They will not smile through the pain and offer up pre-packaged, cult-approved platitudes about grace and redemption. Instead, they are standing as an impenetrable wall between their brother and the public, holding him absolutely accountable and refusing to let their parents weave another web of deceit. To fully grasp the magnitude of this victory, you have to understand exactly what it takes to break the cycle of generational abuse within a high-control group like the IBLP. From the moment these women were born, they were programmed to believe that a woman's highest calling was total submission to the men in her life. They were taught that to expose the sins of a family member, especially a male family member, was a direct rebellion against God himself. They were conditioned to internalize the blame for the actions of men and to view their own suffering as a cross they had to bear silently to maintain the illusion of a perfect Christian home. But Jill and Joy-Anna, along with the siblings supporting them, have done the agonizing, grueling work of deprogramming their own minds. They have waded through years of intense therapy, faced the darkest corners of their childhoods, and emerged not as victims, but as absolute powerhouses. By refusing to give Joseph a pass, they are not merely reacting to a scandal. They are fundamentally dismantling the entire patriarchal structure that allowed the abuse to happen in the first place. They are looking directly at Jim Bob, looking at the entire corrupt institution of the IBLP, and saying, "Your rules no longer apply to us. We will not cover for monsters just because we share their last name. We will not sacrifice the safety of innocent children on the altar of your reputation." The sisters are effectively weaponizing the very platforms their father built to tear down his empire of lies, using the fame he forced upon them to ensure that truth and justice finally prevail. This fierce, unwavering stance also highlights a monumental shift in their roles as mothers. When the 2015 scandals broke, many of the older Duggar daughters were either just starting their families or not yet married. They were still deeply entangled in the daily operations of the big house. But today, they are grown women with children of their own, and that maternal instinct has completely overridden any residual fear they might have of their father's wrath. Hearing these insider reports about an alleged 2020 incident involving a 9-year-old girl triggered a fierce mama bear instinct that Jim Bob's manipulations simply cannot combat. They are looking at their own children, their own daughters and sons, and making a definitive vow that the generational curse of the Duggar family will not infect the next lineage. They know exactly what happens when abuse is swept under the rug. They lived it. They suffered through the night terrors, the anxiety, the deep-seated trauma of knowing their home was not a safe place. By publicly condemning these exclusive theories surrounding Joseph's actions as pure evil, they are building a protective fortress around their own kids. They are teaching their children that true morality means standing up for the vulnerable, even when it costs you your family, even when it costs you your inheritance, and even when it means standing entirely alone. They are proving that true strength isn't found in keeping sweet. It is found in screaming the truth from the rooftops until the cycle of abuse is completely obliterated. For Jim Bob Duggar, watching this unfold must be his absolute worst nightmare realized. His entire life's work was built on the illusion of total control. He built a literal compound to keep the secular world out and his children locked in. He controlled their finances, their media consumption, their courtships, and their public statements. But now, he is watching helplessly as his daughters grab the steering wheel and drive his carefully curated legacy right off a cliff. He has been completely stripped of his power. The money doesn't work anymore because Jill and others have realized that financial freedom is worth far more than his conditional handouts. The religious guilt doesn't work anymore because the sisters have found their own faith outside the suffocating confines of the IBLP. The threat of public shaming doesn't work anymore because the public is overwhelmingly siding with the sisters, cheering them on for their immense bravery. Jim Bob is left standing in the ruins of his own making, desperately trying to silence a storm that he himself created. He cannot spin these exclusive theories away, and he cannot force his daughters back into their boxes. The patriarch has been dethroned by the very women he spent his entire life trying to subjugate, and the sheer poetic justice of that downfall is nothing short of spectacular. Meanwhile, Joseph is left to face the chilling reality of his situation entirely alone. Without the massive Duggar public relations machine running interference, without his sisters offering up their own reputations to salvage his, and without the family's unified front confusing the public narrative, he is completely exposed. The exclusive theories and reports hanging over his head are severe, and the fact that his own flesh and blood are refusing to defend him speaks volumes to the wider world. It validates the severity of the allegations in a way that no media outlet or anonymous source ever could. By calling his alleged actions evil, his siblings have officially handed him over to the consequences of his own choices. They have drawn a hard line in the sand, officially separating the survivors from the enablers, the truth-tellers from the liars. The Duggar family, as we once knew it, is officially dead. It has been completely shattered into a million pieces, and it was the bravery of the Duggar women that finally delivered the fatal blow. They have reclaimed their narrative, they have reclaimed their lives, and they have ensured that the dark secrets of the Duggar compound can no longer hide in the shadows. This entire situation leaves us with so many burning questions about what is currently happening behind the closed doors of the Duggar compound. The fallout from these public statements is going to be absolutely massive, and the retaliation from the IBLP loyalists is likely going to be vicious. We know how Jim Bob operates when he feels backed into a corner, and right now he is more cornered than he has ever been in his entire life. The financial manipulation, the emotional blackmail, the frantic attempts to salvage whatever is left of his crumbling empire. It is all happening right now, behind the scenes, as the family goes to war with itself. Do you think Jim Bob is threatening to cut off Jill and Joy-Anna for speaking out against Joseph? Do you think he will try to weaponize the remaining loyal siblings against them? Or is the rebellion spreading faster than he can contain it? Tell me exactly what you think in the comments down below, because I want to hear your exclusive theories on how this family civil war is going to end. And make sure you are subscribed to the channel with those notification bells turned all the way on, because we are going to be tracking every single report, every single statement, and every single twist in this massive story. And you do not want to miss our next deep dive.